Well, I think from the outset, this is now been one of the most divisive referendums that I think this country has seen. I think some of the language that's been used in terms of, the arguments for certainly the yes side and the no side, the notion that if one doesn't support this proposal, that that there are those that consider them to be racist, which is not the appropriate sort of discourse that we need in Australia right now. And it has been a divisive process, and I believe will continue to be. And it's concerning either way, whether the result is a yes or a no. There's going to have to be some work that needs to be done from the whole community to bring people back together, I believe. I know that half my family is Warlpiri and the other half is white Australian, and I certainly don't want for there to be a division between my family.
So you're saying that the language around the campaigns is dividing Australia, but the voice itself is not a divider, or it is dividing us. If it does get successful, it will divide Australia. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, look, absolutely. When you're providing the opportunity for one group of Australians based on our heritage only to have more of a say over policy that affects all Australians, that to me is absolutely divisive. And, the whole premise of The Voice is based on this idea that as a race of Australians, we're somehow inherently disadvantaged, which is not true at all. So it doesn't begin to look at where the problems actually exist, where the gap exists. It doesn't exist between Indigenous Australia and non-Indigenous Australia. It exists between those of us who are doing quite well, quite privileged, and those who are pretty much marginalised. And the most marginalised are those whose first language isn't English, who live in remote communities. And I think if we focused our efforts on improving their lives, that's where we'd see results. But I don't see that this voice offers that opportunity.
But how does giving Indigenous Australians a platform that they can elevate their opinions to the national discourse and to national conversations, how does that harm? Well,
we've already got the opportunity to do that. That's the thing. Indigenous Australians have already got the opportunity to do that. I know certainly people like myself, Senator Karen Little, we have been bringing to the Parliament the issues, the concerns of those living in remote regional communities, and a lot of the time not being heard. So I believe it's about those of us who are paid by the taxpayer to represent all Australians doing our job better to ensure that those people in those communities are listened to. And look, there's a lot of people in those communities who don't necessarily feel as though they will get an opportunity at the table because that opportunity has been held by those who are quite privileged in their own right as people of Indigenous heritage in this country. And there are those that are concerned that this is much more about a transfer of power to those individuals than it is to providing an opportunity for our most marginalised to actually have a voice.
It feels a little bit like some of what you're saying is the parliamentary system is a way of representation and the system itself isn't broken, but Senator Pocock himself in Senate said, well, the system is broken and this is one way to fix it. If not this, how do we fix the situation that a lot of Indigenous Australians find themselves in?
Well, I think Senator Pocock has to actually provide the evidence as to where he thinks that it's broken. It's one thing to use throwaway lines such as that, and he's completely and utterly removed from the circumstances of certainly the most marginalised. And I have brought marginalised Indigenous Australians to his office to voice their concerns, and he's largely ignored those concerns. So, does he think he's part of that system that is broken? And look, democracy, our democratic system is we are part of the greatest nation on the face of the earth. And while, we do have our flaws, generally we're actually, I think it's a great system. And until people can demonstrate that it is in fact broken, I mean, we have a situation where we have 11 individuals who identify as Indigenous, the first time in our Parliament, an overrepresentation in comparison to our population of Indigenous Australians. And I think that's a wonderful opportunity to be able to address the issues of great concern. But as I said, I think the focus should be on those very marginalised individuals in remote communities and bringing them up to the same standards, the same opportunities as people like myself, as Senator Pocock, and as the other 10 Indigenous representatives in Parliament.
So, Senator, how do we do that? If not a voice to Parliament for Indigenous Australians to allow that issue to be elevated, how would you fix the situation for those who are disadvantaged in Australia?
Sure. Well, I would take a fine-tooth comb and conduct a forensic audit of the $33 billion that is spent year in, year out to determine where it's actually effectively being spent, where it's being wasted, and ensure that certainly those organisations that are funded to alleviate disadvantage are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing, and if they're not, there needs to be some level of accountability. And again, I would focus efforts as to where those most disadvantaged people exist, in improving their lives, as opposed to treating all Indigenous Australians as if we are all disadvantaged because of our heritage and not our circumstances.
Senator Nampijinpa Price, thank you so much.
Thank you.